Hello, everyone. My name is Sharzad. Welcome back to Not My Circle. I hope you guys are enjoying this conversation series. If you are, it would mean the world to me if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It takes 2 seconds and it really, really helps my podcast grow. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. I'm always appreciative if you share an episode that is particularly inspiring to you. Today, I'm talking to a naturist. Basically somebody who's naked all the time. Enjoy. Hi, Stephane.
Hi, Sharzad. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I am so excited to talk to you. So the first question I ask everybody though is, what did you have for breakfast?
Oh, right. This morning I had a very nice cheese from Quebec called Champfleury on some French stick baguette with some homemade marmalade that a friend of mine made for me. It was really nice.
Fancy. That sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm.
You are a nudist or a naturalist?
I'm not a naturalist, but I am a naturist or a nudist. Yes. It depends on who you ask as to which term they use.
Okay. And what do you use?
I use naturist because I think it is more representative of what we are. It's not the same as naturalist. It's not about that we're studying the plants, but it is living in our more natural state. Wow. And it's not about nudity. And that's the thing that confuses outsiders a lot. They think, well, of course it's about nudity. You guys run around naked all the time. But the nudity is simply a tool. I mean, once you're used to it, and it doesn't take very long, it goes away. The nudity is the tool that gets you to kind of accept your true self the way you are, because you no longer can depend on clothing and fashion to make statements. You have to just be who you are. And if you don't like that person, you're going to have to get used to it. And it also, you're presenting then a more authentic self. Your true self is who you're showing. So it changes the dynamics between people. And so that's why it's not about nudity. Nudity is the tool to do that, to live a more natural life.
Okay, let's talk about this. How'd you get into how long have you, I know we were all born naked in our birthday suits, but did you grow up this way? I want to know how this all
No, I definitely did not grow up this way. When I was a teenager, I'm tall and lanky and long arms, long legs, and I was very uncomfortable with my body. I skipped gym, so I wouldn't have to change in front of the other kids, because when I was a kid, a teenager, you changed and showered after gym nude together, which now they don't seem to do anymore, but that's what it was. And it was very uncomfortable. So I discovered naturism. I started with skinny dipping when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I enjoyed it a lot, and it became a thing. I became kind of the instigator in our group. And so people started joking that he goes to nudist kind of jokes. And at one point, I think something said, maybe I should look into that. Maybe I am. And that began this long journey that got me now where it's an enormous part of my life, if not the majority of my lilife. I would say a lot of naturists are naturalists, but most naturalists don't want to be called naturists.
Okay. What was that first experience like? How did you get involved with a community of people that don't wear clothes?
Well, my first experience was, other than the skinny dipping we did when we go camping together, with our group of friends, was when I visited my first club. And it's an interesting little story, because I'd been in, it was before the internet and all that. So research meant going to libraries and looking at stuff which was quite out of date. And so I found a place, and I was working. It was after my university degree was finished. And a friend of mine and I had this thing where whenever the weather looked good the next day, we'd call in sick. And terrible, isn't it? And go to a beach somewhere and just enjoy the day. And so I was always the one picking the beaches. And so this one day I picked her up, and she said, we were platonic friends, just not boyfriend, girlfriend. But I knew that a lot of the places, especially, 30 years ago, that's when it was, give or take, didn't like single men very much. And so I said to her, she said, where are we going? I said, well, and I expected a no. I expected a flat rejection. I said, so do you want to go to like a nude beach place? And she said, sure. And then it was like this incredibly nerve-wracking drive up to the place. I was prepared. I had the directions. We got there. It was in the middle of the week, so there was nobody there. And we checked in. It was a beautiful place. And got a little speech because it was our first time. And then we went on to the lawns. I remember it was a kind of a big lawn on a hill looking down on this little lake. And we put our towels out. We laid down. And my friend Erica goes, well, we didn't come here to keep our clothes on. So took everything off and then laid down. And so here I am fully dressed laying next to a nude woman. And I went, okay, I guess I better do that. And that was my first experience. And I wasn't brave at all, which is funny because you'd think it'd be the other way around.
Well, you said you were kind of shy and insecure in high school. So I imagined it would take a bit to get you super comfortable with going from the shy guy to the one completely naked with the lady.
It did. It definitely did. But I guess, and it was incredible because it was such a sense of liberation. It wasn't just the uncomfortableness of my body, but it's the sudden realization that the body shame it doesn't have to exist. You know, we have this whole thing, you know, if you're ever in a stall and the door doesn't lock, you're like afraid somebody's going to walk in, you know, so if they walk in, they're more embarrassed than you are anyway, but still there's this fear. Or you're in a change room and you think somebody might look underneath, right? We carry all this incredible baggage and suddenly it was gone. And so I guess I overcompensated a little bit because it really became something I sought out and then became an activist and got more involved. And eventually my wife and I even bought our own club.
Okay, let's talk about that. So how does one become involved in a community like this?
Well, for me, I mean, there's lots of ways. You can just find a club. You can find a beach. There's lots of clothing optional beaches, both in Canada and the US. You could, and when you join a club, some of them are run by members. So you can volunteer. But I took it the next step because I found out about the club through an organization called the Federation of Canadian Naturists, so the umbrella organization for Canada. In the US, there's the Naturist Society and AANR, the American Association for Nude Recreation. So what I did is, because I had contacted them and they'd send me information, and I was in advertising, I worked for ad agencies, I said, man, their marketing needs a lot of help. So I volunteered. And so I got involved, and it didn't take too long before they said, hey, a volunteer, let's put him on the board. So I became a director, then eventually president, and so on and so on and so on.
How do you live in this kind of world without feeling like everything is sexualized? I mean, I guess that's one of the biggest questions I have. You think about everybody being naked, and then my first naive thought, I'm sure, is that everybody would just immediately want to have sex with everybody. And maybe that's fine. I mean, that's fine. People can do whatever they want to do, but what is the reality?
Well, the reality is it's not. And I know from, decades of experience of explaining this, that you won't believe me until you experience it yourself. Mm-hmm. It seems impossible in our world, and for good reasons. We live in a hyper-sexualized, objectifying, commodifying of the body world. And you don't have to be nude. I mean, have you ever been turned on by somebody who was dressed? Yeah, of course you have, right?
Totally.
Yeah. And people find you attractive even wearing all your clothing. You don't, right? So arguably, you might even feel a little less attractive without the clothing until you got used to it and comfortable with who you are.
Depending on the time of the month, yes.
Yeah.
And what about like kids' involvement? Because there's so many laws about, protecting children, and you have to wear clothes in this country, in this society, unless you're in a specific place. But how does that work if you grow up in an environment where everybody is naked and there's children involved? I mean, tell me your perspective.
Well, one of the reasons that we ended up buying our own Naturist club is because we were raising our children, who were very, very young at that point, as naturists. And we could see that this club, the owners were elderly, and so they were likely going to sell. And when you put up a very beautiful property near Toronto, which is worth millions of dollars, the first person who shows up is not necessarily interested in continuing that business. Mm-hmm. They had made no plans for transition. So that's why we bought the park that we did. Why was it important to raise our children? Well, I have two boys who are now 21 and 24. And for me, I wanted them to look at bodies, not as women's bodies in particular, since they're both heterosexual, as porn, but as people. And this is something that happens. We have lots of children here. They're growing up and being raised here. So the reason that people think that children shouldn't be nude or with nude people is because they associate with sexuality.
Right.
But here it's the exact opposite. This is the least sexual environment you can get because it's specifically working against it. If you go to a beach, you can't tell me that all those bikinis and bathing suits are not really designed to enhance the parts they hide. There's a lot of sexuality. When you take everything off, it becomes far less sexual, as strange as that might seem. And particularly in an environment where we actively discourage the objectification that is completely encouraged in the mainstream world. So they see a very different world. They see that there's no perfect body. There's no imperfect body per se either. There's just variety. My nose is bigger than yours. Is mine better or is yours better? It's not, right? It's just different. Right. And bodies are the same thing. And for women to see that, you can literally see thousands of women and never see the same looking breasts or waists or any parts of the body. Yet we keep telling all young women, right through older women until they finally get so old that they have to accept it, that there is no ideal to strive for. It doesn't exist. And so that's a very healthy thing for me to raise my kids and other people's kids, to help them grow up this way. They won't necessarily stay, but they will have an alternate narrative in their mind.
Right. I mean, God, I absolutely love the idea of eliminating body shame, because I think no matter who you are, where you're from, you've dealt with some sort of insecurity about your body. I know I have 2 boys too, and it's a chore to get them dressed sometimes because they would prefer to be naked if it was up to them. And to be clear, you're completely naked, like no shoes either?
Well, you get it on the gravel, no shoes. My son never wears shoes because when he was little, he hated shoes, and he has tough feet and he runs on gravel. The kids tend to do that, but we spend a lot of time in offices and wearing shoes and our feet become all soft. But some people, with practice, of course, we wouldn't have survived really well as a species running through the jungle if every time we step on a stick, it would stab us.
True. Do you ever get chilly, like cold, and think, let me put on a jacket, or does your body adapt?
Yes and yes. Okay. So, I am in Canada and it's pretty cold here in the winter. So yeah, we wear clothes when it's cold. But when you work on it, your body has a much greater range of tolerance. Right? We've become very weak because we live in all these climate control environments. And so we can't take a little bit of heat and we can't take a little bit of cold. And your body is actually quite capable of adjusting. It had to. Again, we wouldn't have survived.
Yeah. Do you know the history of why we started wearing clothes and what happens if you leave the house totally naked? Have you ever been in trouble with the law, or do you have a background there?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about it.
Except for I've never been in trouble for being nude, but I did have some arguments with some police officers once. But that's okay. We're fortunate that we live in North America in a society where we can have arguments with the police, right, and we can have discussions, and it's not just a blanket rules. So let's start with the beginning. Why are we like this? Nobody sat down and made a rule. There was no plot to say, let's make every person ashamed, embarrassed, and offended by their own image. It didn't happen. We're very complex creatures, right? I remember taking my kids when they were young to the zoo, and the gorillas had babies, and the little baby gorilla kept annoying the mother, and the mother just whacked it, and the baby rolled away and went away. And, it was very simple. He didn't go, well, does she hate me? And he's not going to be bothered for the rest of his life because their processing is simple, but we're complicated. Anything, why did she say that? Why did she ask me that question? What does he mean by that, right? We try to find meaning and intention through everything. So through that, over time, we started with clothing for protection. That's obvious. But then we like rank, and we like authority, and we like to position ourselves. So clothing started to mean more. In the Middle Ages, clothing at times started to be about rank, in terms that you could only wear certain colors because they were expensive. And then those were sometimes limited to the nobility and the power. People were trying to assert their power on others, because the ones who have power realize that the power is really given by the people. So you have to keep convincing them you're superior. So having fancy clothing was one of the tools that they used, because force doesn't work very well. And then eventually that everybody wants to be better than everybody else. Bourgeoisie, as they say in French, right? Or bougie, as they now say, if you're, the younger generation. So, you like to have ostentatious display of your wealth and power. But also with that, we also start to become technologically advanced. And so with technology, we say, we can do better than nature. Nature's ugly. Paving things is nice. Our body is natural. That's for like animals. And we're not animals. We're superior. We have to elevate ourselves. So we started hiding our bodies. And so with that came, bodies are ugly. Bodies are a shame. I don't want to see them. We have certain standards in society because we want everybody to wear a tie and a dress when they go to a restaurant or come into this club to show that you're part of the group, if you will. So it's all these little things over centuries that build up. And it's all a theory that, different people have different versions of it. But nobody suggests that it's innate, because it's not. There are societies where nudity is perfectly comfortable. And your children, when they were young, and even now, as you said, but girls, boys, there is no 2-year-old that has body shame. It does not exist. It is not innate. It's something that we built. It's a cultural construct, but it becomes really deeply embedded in an emotional way that it's almost like a phobia. So does that long answer to your question? But does that make sense?
I love that answer. And I'm just thinking to myself, if you weren't ready to go fully nude, I wonder what the happy medium is to accept your body without potentially being naked. Like you have, I would say, a more extreme way of eliminating body shame that people that have been programmed to wear clothing wouldn't necessarily be able to like swing to. And I'm just trying to think out loud of how we can prevent kids from growing up with shame with their bodies. Because I think when you love your body, obviously you're going to have a much more fun time while you're alive. Do you feel like everybody should be nude? Is that your hope? Do you?
Oh yeah, it'll never happen. But yes, of course, that's. Okay. I don't think it's as extreme as you suggest. Of course, it seems huge and extreme, yeah. But you've been to the beach, you wear a bathing suit. How much clothing do you have to lose to, it's not that much. Sure. And your bathing suit doesn't really hide much, right? It doesn't keep you dry or warm. And we know what you look like when you wear a bathing suit. Even people who wear the bigger, looser suits and think it hides their body shape because they're uncomfortable with it, I still know what they look like. They're just kidding themselves. Your body exists for you. And that's something that may seem obvious, but that's not what society has told you all your life, especially as a woman. As a woman, you've been told your body exists for the visual pleasure of others.
Yeah, typically a man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to do everything you can to make sure they don't think your body is unattractive. And if it's not attractive enough, because it can't be, because you're trying to achieve the beauty myth, then you are failing and you are not worthy compared to other people, which as a man, I've never had, which is terrible, right? Like I've seen you in your videos. You have an incredible personality. You are great at interacting with people. You are funny. You're so expressive with your kids and all those videos you have seen you on. And yet I bet you a big part of your concern every morning is what you look like. Oh,
it rules my life.
I know, but that seems so wrong, doesn't it?
Oh,
because you have so much more.
100%.
So if you weighed 100 pounds more and you didn't put on makeup, would you be less interesting or less funny?
I mean, I would think so if I'm judging myself harshly. Yeah. Well, if I was 100 pounds more, I'd be super uncomfortable, I think. Because if I'm 10 pounds heavier, I'm uncomfortable. But I'm uncomfortable because my clothes don't fit. And then if I didn't have clothes, maybe I would be more comfortable. Yeah, look, it feels like when I think about this conversation, this thought in my head is like, you should try this. You should try this. You should test it and just see how I react, because I'm a very confident person. I've worked so hard to be comfortable in my skin, but that's an ultimate test of being naked around other people and feeling comfortable. It's not just being naked, and it's feeling like I can be myself and sit down and not worry if I have to tuck in a fat roll to my jeans or whatever. It's just existing. And, thinking about this, and in talking to you, I would love to experience this one day, because I think it would be a true test of, I don't know, just a true test to see if I'm as confident as I think I am.
I have some thoughts. Like, I totally hear that taking your clothes off and not worrying about what men are thinking of you is a big part of this. But at the same time, we're also programmed to find a mate and try and procreate, which does make women want to look nice. And so how do you feel like that plays into this?
Well, I don't know. I don't know your husbands, and I'm not going to judge anything. But when you meet men who are only interested in what you look like, how does that work out?
Not well.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, the reality, sexual. So we're talking about sexuality or relationships, because those are not necessarily the same thing, right? But let's talk about sexuality for a second, because I talk so much about how it's not sexual. We're still sexual beings, and people still find each other attractive here, and they still meet, and they still end up having children. There are lots of children here. So sex, the big lie that we've all been told is that sex has anything to do with what we look like. There might be, you are attracted to visually to certain people, but it tends to be different. I can tell you from all my guy friends that they all have different preferences for whatever reasons. Maybe it's what they were grown up with, or what they experienced, or what kind of porn they watch. I don't know. But they all have some differences, and some for every body type. But beyond that, sometimes who they marry, it wasn't at all who they fantasized about, because I'm older and I've seen it go through the process. But when you're married for a while and you have a good relationship, you know that sex has nothing to do with you seeing each other. It's a look you give each other. It's a whisper. It's a moment in time. Sex is in the brain. We know that. That's well known. And you can be in total darkness and still be turned on. And, somebody can just go up to your husband and whisper something in his ear when he's not looking at you and see if you can get him turned on. I bet you can.
I'm sure.
So what you look like is really pushed way beyond the reality of what it's like and what's necessary for us to get together in a relationship.
What a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
okay, I have one more thing. So the reality of my life is that my daughter goes to a daycare, and I go to a coffee shop, and we can't be naked everywhere we go because we get in trouble. Do you think just taking ourselves to different Nudist beach, nudist camps, just one-off on vacations helps?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. So, and it sounds self-serving. I think you have to go several times a year to a place like mine, but I'm only half kidding. The problem is we are constantly attacked by these attitudes. It's everywhere. It's in the media. It's in the stores when you go shopping. It's everywhere. It's in every story anybody tells you. It's what your friends tell you. It's what your employers tell you. It's everywhere. So for children, I've known a lot of parents who are not naturists and go to raise their children, and they say, look, we're comfortable in the house, and nudity is fairly casual all the time. They'll be fine. The problem is it becomes that my parents are weird. It becomes something that my parents are weird. And I'm not saying it doesn't help. I'm sure it helps a lot. But what helps even more is to see that there's a lot of other people who aren't my weird parents who have the same idea. My boys have grown up since they were little with girls and boys in the same environment. They've seen each other develop and change, and they've seen, the younger ones have seen the older ones. And so they have seen, they're not all buying into it. They're not, my eldest still comes, my youngest, who's 21, doesn't, because it doesn't work with his group of friends. But I know in his mind, he has seen that there's a possibility. He has a different way of looking at women, particularly given that he's heterosexual, that is less objectifying and more about the person. But that only comes, it can't just come at home as easily. It definitely helps if you go into places where you see a lot of people acting and interacting together in what appears normal. It's not, because it's not the norm of society, but it is much more natural.
I know. I've just recently been thinking about, before this conversation, obviously, and before I knew I was going to be able to talk to you, just thinking about at what point should I potentially stop being naked in front of my kids? Never. Hurtful, harmful. And, you know, depending on who you ask, you'll get a variety of answers. And I personally, this is going to sound so weird, but I want to feel really comfortable walking from my bedroom to the bathroom naked. If my kids see me, I don't want to run and hide. Some people might think that's repulsive and disgusting, but for me, I want to have an open house. I want kids to know that their body's going to change. I talk to my kids about pubic hair. I don't want them to be freaked out if they're 9 and they have some hair on their body and they're like, oh, I've never seen this. I don't know what it is. I don't want them to feel shame. I really, really, really work hard on that. But I also, in my reality, I know I'm not going to become a nudist. I mean, never say never. Maybe I will, but I don't think so. But I also want to, I want to find that fine line between being a part of society, but also being super comfortable in my skin, raising my boys to be comfortable in their own bodies, loving their bodies, and never objectifying a woman or a man or whoever they're interested in. So it seems hard because there's just so much sex everywhere. Sex. So
you're the only one that can show them a woman that is not sexual.
Right.
And it's especially if you're not going to go to a naturist environment. Right. And in my opinion, you absolutely should walk around, even when they go, oh, gross, mom, don't do that. You're just going to say, look, I'm me, you can be you. And, you know, you'll just deal with it. There's people who say you have to take their feelings into account. Well, how would that work? You know, let's say you're a vegetarian and they want to eat meat. Well, I'm not cooking meat. I'm a vegetarian. Nobody would suggest you have to apologize and you have to cook them meat. You know, if you're raised a Christian and then suddenly you want to become Jewish, you know, or whatever, you don't have to become Jewish yourself. You can say, well, if you want to explore that religion, by all means, go for it. But why is it that with nudity, some people say, well, now you suddenly have to adapt to what everybody else tells you what to do. And I don't think that works well. And there is a lot of research, there's academic research that shows that children who are exposed, pardon the pun, to casual nudity actually benefit from it. Yeah. There's not a huge amount of research, and I don't want to overstate because there's way too much of that going on where people jump on one study and think everything's perfect. But there is nothing that shows it's bad. And I've looked for it because I'm a person who has these discussions all the time. And if there's a bad study, I want to see it so I'm prepared for it. And I've done hours and hours of research in academia. Sure, you'll find some opinion article from some columnist who has an idea, but at best it's based on some weird early Freud theory, which doesn't matter anymore. There is no evidence it's bad for your kids to see you naked. They won't like it when they get older because their kids will tell them, their friends will tell them it's bad. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you have to give into that. You can say, you know, people might tell you that I think it's fine. It's just a body, dear.
Right. And I mean, in Europe, of course, I've seen, you know, there's tons of topless beaches and it's every age and it's like not a big deal at all. And I mean, I appreciate that because everybody feels so comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's great. What do you think some common misconceptions are with your lifestyle?
Well, we've kind of addressed them. The biggest misconception is that it's all about sex and that there's big orgies going on all the time. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, there's a lot of stuff out there that suggests it is because I have no control over who uses the term. Right. So there are people. So I was in Paris. Oh gosh, it's almost 2 years ago now because we haven't been able to travel. And I walked in front of in a small street, a massage place. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Yeah. Right. And there was there's this reclining woman saying, massage. Mm-hmm. And it says massage naturist, naturist massage. Mm-hmm. Because even in France, to the general public, naturist means nude. Mm-hmm. And nude means sex. So you want your massage therapist to be nude. She's a naturist now, while she gives you the rub and tug. So, that's my biggest problem. And I don't know how to stop it. For 100 years, people who do the opposite of us, that is hypersexualize and objectify, have called themselves what we are. Mm-hmm. And you'll find websites that are like that. Look at all these nudist people having an orgy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what can I do?
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest one, the biggest battle. And the other one we've touched on, which is that somehow it's bad for children, again, because of the sexuality and because of a misunderstanding that the people who might prey on your children are somehow made to do it by nudity. They're not. If we got rid of every single nude picture that exists on the planet tomorrow, there would still be the same number of pedophiles. That's, again, trying to change the behavior of the victim rather than trying to stop the perpetrator.
That's a really good point. Do you own any clothes?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know. I own nice clothes. I have a tuxedo even, because for a while I was going regularly to black tie events. Yeah. I know how to dress. I now know how to dress well. I know how to play your game.
Yeah, right. Do you just like cringe at the thought of getting dressed though?
No, not necessarily. It can be fun to play the game. I just, people sometimes says, look, why are you so obsessed with being naked? I say, I'm not. I'm dressed a lot. Well, you're the obsessed one because you're never naked.
What kind of trouble can you get into if you just walk down the street naked? Like what happens?
Well, I'm in Canada, so I can tell you that it's a criminal act at the federal level, which is almost never enforced because it's complicated legal explanation. But you basically you can't be nude without a lawful excuse, and there's lots of lawful excuses. So here, if you have a beach that's designated as a nude beach, like you do in Toronto and Vancouver, then that's a lawful excuse. And there's a bunch of other reasons why. Protests, for example, because free speech trumps a public order law. So the Gay Pride Parade in Toronto, people walk nude. The World Naked Bike Ride in Toronto, people do that nude because that's free speech. In the United States, it's more complicated because there are no federal statutes. So laws are made either at the state level against nudity or worse at the local municipal level. And that means it's a patchwork all over the place. There are actual places in the United States where you can be nude and walk down the street. People will look at you funny. The police might even arrest you until they realize they have no case. And then you talk about nudity, but also there's a difference between men and women in many places where I can be top free, but you can't because somehow your nipple is incredibly scary, but mine is fine. But in some places like New York State, it is completely illegal. So you can walk down the street in New York City, top free as a woman, and you will not get arrested.
Good to know. Thinking about growing
Is that your plan now?
Yeah. Yes. We did this thing growing up called Beta Breakers. It was a race in San Francisco, and people were always naked. I mean, a majority of the people were naked.
San Francisco has actually a very interesting story because nudity was fully legal in San Francisco. So in Castro, there were people walking around nude, just walking around nude, sitting in cafes outside in the coffee, in terraces or whatever, or on public benches nude. And they were doing it and it was perfectly legal. And I think it was in the 90s. One of the representatives from the city decided that was just terrible and passed a law. And there was a lot of protest because until then you were allowed to be nude. And it was an interesting time.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You definitely opened my mind more. And this is something that I've, thought about here and there in my life. So I appreciate actually having an open conversation with you because I think your lifestyle sounds unique, and I really, really, really love just the overall themes of being super comfortable with who you are and eliminating body shame because that is plaguing our society. So I appreciate all the things that you're doing. Super interesting, and I hope that our paths cross in real life soon.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Bye.